What Churchill said when told France was surrendering after just 6 weeks' introduction, June 1940. The phone call that would define a generation. Winston Churchill, Britain's newly appointed Prime Minister, received the message that would leave his nation utterly alone against Nazi Germany. France, the mighty French Republic with the world's largest army, was collapsing after a mere 6 weeks of fighting. What Churchill said next would echo through history, transforming despair into defiance and reshaping the entire trajectory of the Second World War in ways that would astound the world. Chapter 1. The Unthinkable Collapse, 10 June 1940, 11:47 p.m. The telephone on Winston Churchill's desk at 10 Downing Street rang with the shrill insistence that could only mean catastrophe. The Prime Minister, a glass of whiskey beside him and a half-smoked cigar balanced precariously in the ashtray, lifted the receiver with the deliberate calm of a man who had already witnessed too many disasters in this war. Outside, London slumbered uneasily under blackout regulations, the city's familiar landmarks rendered invisible against the night sky. The smell of coal smoke drifted through the partially opened window, mixing with the acrid scent of tobacco that perpetually filled Churchill's war rooms. The voice on the other end belonged to British Ambassador Sir Ronald Campbell, calling from a chateau south of Tours, where the French government had retreated in panicked disarray. His words arrived fractured by a poor connection, but their meaning was devastatingly clear. Prime Minister, I must inform you that the French government intends to seek an armistice with Germany. Marshal Pétain has convinced the cabinet that further resistance is impossible. They are preparing to surrender. Churchill's face, already lined with the exhaustion of leading a nation through its darkest hour, seemed to age another decade in that single moment. For 6 weeks, Britain had watched in mounting horror as German panzers tore through the supposedly impregnable Maginot Line as the Wehrmacht executed the most devastating military campaign in modern history. France, glorious France, with her 5 million men under arms, her 3,000 tanks, her proud military traditions stretching back to Napoleon, was collapsing like a house of cards before the Nazi onslaught. The strategic implications were so catastrophic they defied comprehension. Britain's entire defensive strategy had been predicated on French resistance. Military planners had calculated that France's massive army would tie down German forces for months, perhaps years, allowing Britain time to mobilize fully, to bring the Empire's resources to bear, to wait for American intervention that might never come. Instead, between 10th May and 10th June 1940, the unthinkable had occurred. France had been defeated in 6 weeks, her armies shattered, her government preparing to abandon the fight entirely. Churchill placed the receiver down with uncharacteristic gentleness, as though the telephone itself might shatter from the weight of this news. Around him, in the cabinet war rooms, staff officers moved through corridors carved beneath Whitehall's streets, their faces bearing the hollow-eyed exhaustion of men and women working 18-hour days to coordinate a war effort that was rapidly unraveling. The maps covering the walls told a story of unrelenting disaster, red arrows representing German advances driving deeper into France with each passing hour. British forces evacuated from Dunkirk barely 2 weeks earlier, leaving behind virtually all their heavy equipment on French beaches. Major General Hastings Ismay, Churchill's chief military assistant, entered the room to find the Prime Minister standing motionless, staring at the map of Europe with an expression Ismay would later describe as beyond grief, beyond anger, something harder and more terrible. The strategic reality was brutally simple. If France surrendered, Britain would stand utterly alone against Nazi Germany, which now controlled virtually all of Western Europe from the Arctic Circle to the Spanish border. German armies would occupy the entire French coastline, bringing Luftwaffe bombers within easy striking distance of British cities. The Royal Navy would face German U-boats operating from French Atlantic ports. Britain's imports of food and raw materials, The lifeblood of an island nation dependent on sea lanes would be subject to unprecedented assault. The human cost already defied comprehension. French casualties exceeded 90,000 dead, with another 200,000 wounded in just 6 weeks of fighting. British forces had suffered 11,000 dead and 14,000 wounded, losing 64,000 vehicles, 2,472 guns, 20,000 motorcycles, and 416,000 tons of stores at Dunkirk alone. The British Expeditionary Force had been reduced from a modern mechanized army to what one officer acidly described as infantry with rifles and not much else. Churchill's war cabinet, gathering in emergency session at midnight, represented the full spectrum of British political establishment. Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax, elegant and aristocratic, advocated exploring negotiated peace with Germany through Italian mediation. His argument carried a terrible logic. With France gone, Britain possessed no realistic means of defeating Germany militarily. Better to negotiate now from relative strength than wait until German invasion made negotiation impossible. Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kingsley Wood, supported Halifax, calculating the economic impossibility of Britain sustaining war without French support. Clement Attlee, leader of the Labour Party and newly appointed Lord Privy Seal, remained silent, his face unreadable. Churchill listened to each argument with his characteristic intensity, occasionally grunting, occasionally sipping whiskey, never interrupting. When Halifax concluded by stating that "We must face facts. Britain cannot win this war alone," the chamber fell into silence so profound that the ticking of the wall clock became audible, each second marking Britain's slide toward either capitulation or unprecedented national risk. What happened in that room over the next 3 hours would determine not merely Britain's fate, but the course of the entire Second World War. The decision facing Churchill was existential. Follow France into negotiated surrender, preserving Britain's cities and population from devastation, but accepting Nazi domination of Europe, or commit the British nation to a fight that every rational military assessment suggested was unwinnable. German forces possessed overwhelming superiority. 3 million combat troops versus Britain's 2 million partially equipped soldiers, 7,400 aircraft versus Britain's 2,913, and complete control of continental Europe's industrial base. Churchill rose from his chair with the ponderous deliberation of a man carrying intolerable weight. His opening words would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. "Gentlemen, I understand the logic of everything that has been said tonight. I understand the mathematics of our predicament. But I must tell you that if this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground." The War Cabinet session extended until 3:47 a.m., with Churchill systematically demolishing each argument for negotiation. Britain possessed advantages Germany could not easily overcome. The Royal Navy remained dominant, giving Britain control of sea lanes beyond German reach. The English Channel, though narrow, represented a formidable obstacle to invasion. Germany possessed no specialized landing craft and minimal amphibious assault experience. British radar stations provided unprecedented early warning of air attacks. Fighter Command, though outnumbered, operated over home territory with superior fighter aircraft in the Spitfire and Hurricane. Most crucially, Churchill argued, Britain possessed something no military calculation could quantify: the determination of a free people who would never accept foreign domination. By dawn on 11th June, the decision was made. Britain would fight on alone, whatever the cost. Churchill's final words to his exhausted cabinet captured the essence of British character that would define the coming years. "We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall never surrender." Chapter 2. Forging Defiance from Despair. The implementation of Britain's decision to fight alone required transforming an entire nation from shocked spectator of French collapse into active participant in total war. The morning of 13th of June 1940 broke grey and drizzly over Britain, the characteristically dismal weather mirroring the national mood. Churchill addressed Parliament at 3:15 p.m, standing at the dispatch box in the House of Commons with the weight of an empire resting on his rounded shoulders. The chamber was packed beyond capacity, with members standing in aisles and doorways, all understanding they were witnessing a moment of historical magnitude. His speech lasted 17 minutes, but would resonate for generations. Churchill's voice, with its distinctive lisp and dramatic cadences, filled the chamber as he outlined the brutal reality. The news from France is very bad. What has happened there affects us profoundly. He paused, allowing the full implications to settle. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. Another pause, longer this time, building tension. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age. Now, the climax came with words that would be quoted in British classrooms for the next 80 years. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour. The chamber erupted in approval, not jubilant celebration, but something harder and grimmer, the collective acknowledgement that Britain would fight regardless of odds. Implementing this defiance operationally required mobilization on unprecedented scale. The Ministry of Home Security, established just months earlier, coordinated transformation of British cities into defensive positions. Local defense volunteers, soon renamed the Home Guard, recruited 1.5 million men within 8 weeks, though they initially drilled with wooden rifles and improvised weapons because real firearms were desperately scarce after Dunkirk's equipment losses. Women joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force and other services in numbers that shocked traditionalists. By August, 100,000 women served in auxiliary roles, freeing men for combat duties. British industry underwent revolutionary transformation. Lord Beaverbrook, the Canadian-born newspaper magnate appointed Minister of Aircraft Production, drove factory managers with manic intensity to increase fighter production. His methods were unorthodox, abrasive, and spectacularly effective. Beaverbrook bypassed bureaucratic procurement procedures, seized civilian aluminium for aircraft construction, even requesting housewives donate pots and pans for melting down, and implemented round-the-clock manufacturing shifts. Factory workers, many of them women stepping into traditionally male roles, worked 12-hour shifts 6 days weekly. In May 1940, British factories produced 325 fighters. By July, production reached 496 aircraft monthly, despite German bombing of manufacturing centres. The logistical challenges were staggering. Britain imported 55 million tons of goods annually before the war. Food, oil, raw materials essential for industrial production. With France's surrender, German U-boats gained access to Atlantic ports from Norway to Spain, creating unprecedented threat to British convoy routes. The Admiralty calculated that if submarine warfare reduced imports below 25 million tons annually, Britain would face starvation and industrial collapse within months. This was no theoretical concern. In June alone, U-boats sank 58 Allied ships totaling 284,113 tons. Coastal defences received desperate priority. Military engineers supervised construction of over 18,000 pillboxes, blockhouses, and anti-tank obstacles along beaches where German invasion might land. Beaches were seeded with mines and barbed wire. Roads inland from coastal areas were blocked with obstacles designed to slow advancing armour. Signposts were removed throughout southern England to confuse German paratroopers. The bizarre nature of preparations illustrated Britain's predicament. Housewives knitting socks for soldiers, while their husbands dug anti-tank ditches in village greens. Boy Scouts serving as bicycle messengers for military commands. Retired army officers training farmers to use shotguns against paratroopers. The human dimension revealed Britain's character most profoundly. Rationing, introduced in January for butter and bacon, extended to meat, tea, jam, biscuits, cheese and eggs. The Ministry of Food calculated that average adult diet dropped to 2,400 calories daily, adequate for survival but requiring constant hunger management. Children received priority for milk and eggs, resulting in some mothers going without for weeks. The characteristic British response was resignation mixed with dark humour, jokes about sawdust in sausages, cartoons depicting Hitler dismayed by British determination to queue properly even during air raids. Regional evacuation of children from cities anticipated bombing campaigns. Between June and September 1940, 125 million children were evacuated from London, Birmingham, Liverpool and other industrial centres to rural areas considered safe from aerial attack. The scenes at railway stations captured national trauma. Mothers weeping as children as young as 5 departed carrying gas masks and small suitcases, not knowing when they would reunite. Many evacuation host families faced severe overcrowding, with rural cottages suddenly housing twice their normal population. Churchill's personal schedule during this period bordered on inhuman. He typically worked from 8 a.m. to 3 or 4 a.m. the following morning, sustained by whiskey, cigars, and brief afternoon naps. His routine included morning review of overnight intelligence reports, cabinet meetings, parliamentary sessions, inspection tours of military installations and bombed civilian areas, evening meetings with military commanders, and late-night dictation of speeches and memoranda. Staff members struggled to match his pace, with some collapsing from exhaustion. Churchill's personal secretary, Elizabeth Leighton, later described arriving at Downing Street fresh from secretarial school and being immediately thrust into transcribing top-secret war communications, while Churchill paced and dictated, cigar smoke creating a perpetual fog in the war rooms. The psychological dimensions of Britain's solitary stand manifested in unexpected ways. Church attendance increased dramatically, with congregations swelling by an estimated 40% as Britain sought spiritual reassurance in existential crisis. Patriotic societies reported membership surges. Sales of British history books rose sharply, suggesting population seeking connection to national heritage in moment requiring extraordinary resolve. Conversely, psychiatric hospitals reported increased admissions for anxiety and depression, with civilian mental health becoming unacknowledged casualty of national stress. By late June, German forces occupied all of France's Atlantic and Channel coastlines. Luftwaffe bomber bases in France placed London just 15 minutes flying time from enemy airfields. German reconnaissance aircraft photographed British coastal defences daily. Wehrmacht divisions assembled in French ports began amphibious assault training. Every intelligence assessment indicated invasion was imminent, likely between mid-July and early September, when weather and tides would favour cross-channel operations. Britain's response was to dig deeper, work longer, and prepare for the onslaught with grim determination that German planners fundamentally misunderstood. The final week of June saw Churchill touring southern coastal defences personally, inspecting pillboxes, reviewing troop dispositions, and delivering impromptu speeches to soldiers. At one position near Dover, watching the grey waters of the Channel, Churchill turned to the accompanying general and said, "They'll have a bloody time of it trying to cross that." The general, noting the minimal defences actually in place, responded, "Let us hope they think so, Prime Minister." Churchill's reply captured the essence of Britain's strategy. They will think so because we shall make them think so, and by making them think so, we shall make it true. Chapter 3. The Perplexity of the Conqueror. Throughout July and August 1940, German military planners confronted a strategic puzzle that defied their doctrine and experience. Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, should have been straightforward. Germany controlled all continental Europe, from the North Cape to the Pyrenees. The Wehrmacht had demonstrated unprecedented operational competence, demolishing armies that had taken decades to build in mere weeks. Yet Britain, alone and apparently defenseless after losing most of her army's equipment at Dunkirk, refused to acknowledge the obvious logic of her strategic position and negotiate surrender. Adolf Hitler himself expressed perplexity in private meetings with his general staff. Wehrmacht records, declassified decades later, reveal Hitler's conflicting calculations. He had expected Britain to seek terms after France's fall. The rational response for an island nation suddenly deprived of continental allies and facing overwhelming military superiority. Hitler possessed genuine, if patronizing, respect for the British Empire and British military tradition. He viewed Britain as natural ally against Soviet communism and saw little strategic benefit in destroying British power completely. On 19th July, Hitler delivered a speech to the Reichstag, offering Britain a last appeal to reason, suggesting negotiations could achieve peace with honor. Churchill's government rejected the offer within hours, not through formal diplomatic channels, but through BBC broadcasts dismissing Hitler's proposal as absurd. German military intelligence struggled to comprehend Britain's capabilities and intentions. Luftwaffe reconnaissance revealed massive expansion of fighter command airfields, construction of defensive positions across southeastern England, and industrial mobilization that suggested Britain intended prolonged resistance rather than negotiated capitulation. These observations contradicted German assumptions that British morale was fragile following France's collapse. Abwehr intelligence reports from agents in Britain, many of whom were actually British double agents feeding disinformation, painted confusing picture of national determination mixed with apparent military weakness. The fundamental incompatibility between German doctrine and British operational philosophy created German strategic paralysis. The Wehrmacht excelled at rapid mechanized warfare exploiting breakthrough and encirclement, the blitzkrieg tactics that devastated Poland and France. Applying these methods to Britain required amphibious assault across contested waters against an enemy with naval superiority and air defenses. German planners had no experience with opposed amphibious operations and possessed no specialized landing craft. The Kriegsmarine calculated it could assemble barges and small vessels to transport first assault wave, but providing naval protection against Royal Navy intervention was impossible. Germany's surface fleet was vastly inferior to British naval power. The solution, German planners determined, required achieving air superiority over the Channel and southern England before attempting invasion. If the Luftwaffe destroyed fighter command and established complete control of British airspace, the Royal Navy would be vulnerable to aerial attack and forced to withdraw from Channel waters, allowing invasion barges to cross unmolested. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, Luftwaffe commander, assured Hitler that his air force could achieve this objective within 4 weeks. On 13th of August 1940, the Luftwaffe launched Adlertag, Eagle Day, initiating the campaign history would remember as the Battle of Britain. What followed over the next 2 months confounded every German expectation. The Luftwaffe, the world's most powerful air force, deployed 2,550 aircraft, including 1,107 fighters and 1,380 bombers against Fighter Command's 640 operational fighters. German numerical superiority should have been decisive. Instead, British advantages that German planners had underestimated proved critical. RAF fighter pilots fought over home territory, allowing shot-down pilots who survived to return to duty. German pilots who bailed out became prisoners. British radar stations provided early warning, allowing fighters to intercept bombers rather than flying standing patrols that wasted fuel. British aircraft industry replaced losses faster than German intelligence believed possible. Most crucially, RAF pilots demonstrated skill and determination that shocked their opponents. German bomber crews reported combat experiences that contradicted pre-campaign briefings. They had been told British fighter defense was minimal and poorly coordinated. Instead, they faced precisely directed interceptions, with Spitfires and Hurricanes appearing exactly at moments of maximum vulnerability. Luftwaffe bomber losses mounted alarmingly. 45 aircraft destroyed on 15th August, 75 on 18 August, 56 on 30 August. By early September, bomber crews faced psychological breaking point, with some units reporting that terror of British fighter interception caused combat effectiveness deterioration. Oberst Paul Deichmann, Luftwaffe Chief of Operations, later described German perplexity. "We had been assured British fighter command was on the verge of collapse. Daily we were told the RAF had only 50 or 100 fighters remaining. Yet each mission encountered fierce resistance. Where were these aircraft coming from? It was incomprehensible." What German intelligence failed to grasp was Lord Beaverbrook's revolutionary aircraft production methods and fighter command's systematic rotation of squadrons, ensuring fresh pilots always faced Luftwaffe formations, even as exhausted squadrons withdrew to refit. The Luftwaffe's strategic error compounded German difficulties. On 7th September, frustrated by inability to destroy fighter command airfields and hoping to break British civilian morale, German high command shifted targeting from military installations to London itself. That night, 348 bombers, escorted by 617 fighters, attacked London's docks and civilian areas, killing 436 civilians and injuring 1,600. The raids continued nightly, the Blitz that would eventually kill 43,000 British civilians. But this strategic shift allowed fighter command's battered airfields to repair and regroup, giving British air defences respite exactly when they most needed it. British civilian response to the Blitz further perplexed German planners. Bombing was intended to shatter morale and create pressure on Churchill's government to negotiate. Instead, British determination hardened. Londoners slept in underground stations, emerging each morning to clear rubble and continue work. Factories bombed one day resumed production the next, operating from damaged buildings. The characteristic British response combined resignation with stubborn defiance, queuing properly at bus stops despite bomb craters, commenting dryly on destruction, maintaining routines with deliberate normalcy that suggested no amount of bombing would break national will. By late September, Luftwaffe losses forced German high command to acknowledge that air superiority would not be achieved. Between 10th of July and 31st October, the Luftwaffe lost 733 aircraft destroyed and 638 damaged beyond repair. Fighter command lost